Hello, everybody. My name's Sam Kenyon. I'm the author of I Am Not Raymond Wallace, and I'm here today with Alex Wingfield, who has done the audiobook. Now, what's interesting about the circumstances in which Alex has done the audiobook is that Alex and I first met some 10, 12 years ago, actually
Oh
in
yeah.
a student teacher role when Alex was studying the Royal Academy of Music and I was musical director on the show that he was doing. And I wanted to invite Alex to chat with me because I don't think we hear very much about the audiobook interpreters who play an absolutely crucial role in bringing the story to all sorts of people. And I'm delighted that you did this book. Really
Yeah.
thrilled. So we've got a couple of questions for each other, haven't we, really? Just
Yeah, absolutely. Hi,
um,
everyone. I'm Alex. Hey.
and so can I start with the
Go
question for
for it.
you? Um, it's probably it's sort of 101 audiobooks probably, but how do you choose the characteristics for each character's voice, the pitch, the quality, the attitude, and that sort of thing?
So generally, obviously you have to read the book before you make these decisions, because you never know. At the end of the book, it might say he said in his rich Scottish brogue, and you've prepared something completely different. So it's all there on the page, or in most books I've read, it's pretty clear. They'll give you an intimation of what the accent would be at the beginning, and a sort of characterization of that accent. If they don't, you obviously have to read between the lines, and that's quite an exciting process for a voice actor, I find, um, and one that you get quite a lot of poetic license over. Um, it's also really interesting, and I felt it quite keenly in your book, Sam. Was that you didn't really need to have someone say he said gruffly, for instance, because you kind of get a sense of what the character would be like. If we're talking about in this book, someone like Doty, it was quite clear how I saw him in my head, and tried to match the voice accordingly. Quite clipped, quite stern, often quite gruff, quite for want of a better expression, quite a sort of masculine kind of energy. Um, and that's really exciting. So there's that, I would say, would be use what's on the page, and then also make some bold decisions for yourself and just hope they stick.
Very good. Um, did reading the book make you reflect on your own sexuality and life experience as a result of that?
So, confession time, I felt a little bit of imposter syndrome narrating this book. I'll explain why. Heterosexual male, um, and I feel like we live in a world where often now, for good reason and for positive change, um, as an actor, I certainly find I'm given roles that fit who I am in real life, and that applies to a lot of things, including sexuality. So, quick answer to your question is yes. It made me reflect upon my own sexuality. Um, it made me assess, to some degree, based on the time I live in and I suppose my sexual preferences, um, in lots of ways, how easy you have it as yeah, heterosexual white male living in the UK. Um, so this book was pretty eye opening for that, based on the time frame it was. I know it's set over 40 years or so, but particularly the beginning of the book, that voyage of discovery that Raymond has, and the coming to terms with who he was very confronting. And as the voice of that person, you kind of have to inhabit it. Um, and I felt like I fully understood where it was coming from, and I could relate to that, despite it not being my lived experience. So it did really make me think about sexuality. It didn't make me question my own sexuality, but
No, no, it's interesting. Another straight friend of mine who read it just said it made him realize what a piece of dumb luck his sexuality was, is the way he
Mm.
described it. And that was really, I found that really striking, that it actually had the effect of. And well, the other thing that's very funny, which brings on me onto my next question, he said that it was really the sex scenes in it were really uncomplicated for him because he didn't have to worry what his part in them was.
Right.
He could just enjoy them and be turned on them by them, as he said he was, without any concern about anything more than that, which I thought was really interesting.
I know. I would agree with that. And the way they're told, which we'll come on to, I'm sure, is so matter of fact and so, yeah, kind of in your face in a good way. That you're left with no other choice but to read it, digest it, and like you say, be turned on by it, regardless of your sexuality. I suppose that's the point of a good book, isn't it? That you get sucked in, yeah, by what's going on in the page. And there's a slightly voyeuristic tendency as the casual reader, sure. As the narrator, like I was there saying those things from my perspective, and that's really interesting. And probably where that slight imposter syndrome came from. It's like, oh, is this my story to tell at points?
Yeah,
Interesting.
I can understand that. I mean, I think you did them beautifully, and you did them really front-footed, matter-of-factly.
Good.
I really appreciated it because you can't shy away from it.
No.
And it's what's funny is hearing it read, I suppose, but you reading it, I realized how brazen I was. When it's on the page, it's quite different, but when it's in somebody's mouth, it's
Mm-hmm.
really out there. And I'm now understanding why so many people are talking about those scenes.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few phrases that will forever stick in my mind. Taught mushroom. That's one of them.
Yeah, highly edited that sequence was. Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Well, that brings me to my last question, which is what was or were the most difficult scenes to prepare?
Um, so, I mean, we've come from the sex scenes. I didn't find them very difficult to prepare because of the matter of factness, and it kind of felt like that was so necessary to tell that in such a way. So, I mean, like I think like for a listener, they might think that I would say that the sex scenes, but really no. I found the letters towards the end were pretty. I actually filmed one of the scenes. I think it was the last letter that Joe sent, and I found that pretty hard to get through. Yeah, so I would say that those letters, because I find that the back and forth between the two characters it sort of ramps up in the honesty, and the openness was quite touching. So I think that last letter. Um,
Do you mean Raymond? You
yeah,
mean
yeah,
part
sorry.
two?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah. Okay. And why did you film it?
Um, I think probably that. I think I sensed that I always like to take a few pictures or like record bits so I can hear it, because you don't get to hear much of what you get back or critique yourself. So I do that every so often, and I think I assessed early on that that was probably the biggest challenge, and the part that I found the most powerful and moving for me in the book. It just made me quite sad. Yeah, simple as that. But the book is formatted very uniquely, which I love, with different sections told from different perspectives. Was this always the plan, or was it something that developed once you started writing the book?
It's a really good question. So the structure was always what I wanted, because what I wanted to show is how a single person's decision, or a decision made by a single person, can ricochet through other people's lives. And in order to do that, needed to have other people come into being, such as Raymond's son, Joe.
Mhm.
But also, I wanted to see how we age and reflect on decisions as we age. So even if we weren't the person who made that decision, how that decision, so I'm dancing around because I don't want to do any spoilers, but how we might be made to reflect on decisions made on our behalf um, later on in life. So to let characters age. Um, and I don't know if you know, but I wrote this 20 years ago. First wrote the first draft 20 years
I
ago.
didn't know that. No.
And what I did then was really just sat down and wrote. And I had an idea and I was inspired by a true story and I just sat down and wrote. And then when I came back to it with an editor, Nathan, for this book, I then I added some bits in. So in part two, it used to be just a letter from Raymond, and now it's a letter from another character as well.
Yeah.
Part three was always this dance between two different characters. And I developed other character lines in part one and introduced new characters. So Joshua was a brand new character. Doty was always there. Dolores was always there. Bukowski was always there. But to and just to try and build up the early part of the book. So the structure, yes, was always there, though lots of things um, were added. Not a lot taken away. A bold decision, which we know from the very first page, that this isn't a spoiler, is that part one is written by Raymond Wallace.
Yeah.
And what's funny about it is that a lot of people, despite that being on the pages as you come through and various references throughout, forgot that during the process of that first part. And
Yeah.
then, and then were quite struck by it when it comes up starkly. So I was intrigued and excited by people getting lost in it, you know. But yes, so the structure was absolutely there from the beginning.
I think that's great because I love it when the format of a book challenges me. I can think of a few examples that because you always just go like, "Oh, I like it. I'm in a new realm now." It's really nice to be suddenly reading letters between two people. It's just a different format. I was struck by it in two books that come to mind. Grief is the Thing with Feathers. Have you ever read that by Max Porter? And it's told very uniquely, differently. It's another book, Lincoln in the Bardo, by
I
George Saunders.
adore that book.
Yeah, and again, it's told half script, half like academic references, and yeah, just things like that. There's another one called His Bloody Project. I can't remember the author, Graham McCrae maybe, and it suddenly goes into sort of like a courtroom transcript, and I just things like that I find really exciting. So I was surprised in the best way when I got into part two, because obviously I just read it chronologically as you do books, and yeah, pleasantly surprised that it just shifted in a way I didn't expect, and over such a long time frame, which is quite a challenge to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's 40 years. It's funny. It is in the books, the sequences in the book, but actually we go way back to 1919, which is when Papa's born, and 39, 38, 39 when he's talking about it. So it's even
Yeah.
longer, although 40 years is what seems to be in the book. It
Yeah.
was, yes, I had on the back wall here, had a load of post-it notes.
Timeline.
Like, exactly. All just take, so every now and then I'd go, oh, well, where am I? And I changed them around, of course, but it was just essential. That was an essential part of um, the editorial process, really, to get that time.
Mm.
And what was the other thing? I had one timeline that I never really used, but that was of major events that took place
Oh
during
yeah.
in the world that weren't in the book. That
Yeah.
I considered, you know, Judy Garland's death, Judy Garland's Carnegie Hall concert, because that comes in, but her death later on. And so uh, having those little anchors really and reminders. There's a whole thing about Nureyev that I was going to get into part three,
Yeah.
into part two rather, because he was at the Paris Opera at the time. Anyway, I'm going to do
But
spoilers.
it's hard to add those in without almost making them sound glib, you know. You've got to treat them with the well, I suppose they have to be relevant in the context rather than just like, here we are in 1963 when this happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to balance, I suppose. Yeah.
Mhm.
I used the word challenge already, so this is good. What were your biggest challenges you faced when writing the novel, and is there anything that you would have done differently or would do differently in the process?
So I don't think I would change anything actually, because I had such an extraordinary. It's been an extraordinary experience. Partly drafting it first 20 years ago and then coming back to it. One thing which I was really struck by was that originally I found it really difficult to write dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, I was really up for really elaborate philosophical reflections in prose, but dialogue was something that I was really out of step with. And then I wrote Miss Littlewood and therefore wrote my first script. And what I found, I had to be persuaded to put a lot more detail into the prose when I edited it because I just wanted the dialogue to speak for itself. And what
Sure.
Nathan wanted was, he'd often say, but how does Raymond feel at this point in time? And it felt to me that if I was telling the reader how he felt, then I wasn't doing a good enough job in the dialogue. So
Mm.
it was almost like, but at the same time, I totally understand what he means because that's what we get in novels. And actually, I didn't want to do what I felt was I didn't want to do line readings. It was like me telling an actor what they were feeling. So I took it note, but I did it. I tried to then tighten up the dialogue so that you could tell what they were feeling, and then be quite minimal with that. So that was quite exciting
Yeah.
as a challenge to go. How do I convey what I want to convey, but without dictating too much? And he wanted me to. He quite often said, "What do they look like?" And I really wanted and want people to cast the novel for themselves.
Hmm.
So I might say what they were wearing or a little bit of makeup or what their hair was like, but very rarely do much more than that. Or
Yeah.
how he feels. If somebody looks in the mirror, when we look in the mirror, we don't go, "Oh, I look like this." You're not going to spell out that you're looking at your father's eyes or that your mother's cheekbones or whatever.
Yeah.
So to find ways of making it characterful and narrative driven description um, was really was an exciting challenge.
And
Um,
it kind of sounds like you also wanted to give people enough to make their own opinions on people or what they think or what they look like, which I think is really exciting in this book, especially when Raymond at times seems like he's saying one thing but thinking another. That the dialogue, it's kind of important that it tells one story rather than the whole story.
that's
Do you
plausible. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. For the interlocutor, for the person
Yeah,
who's yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And
yeah.
great.
I also I just a question's occurred to me now that I'm interested in. How's it been received? All of it.
I mean, because it was an unbound book, which means that people have pledged for it. It was people who were enthusiastic about me in some way or other, by and large, the first tranche of people. But then, so i.e., by and large, really enthusiastic. Although I think what's been interesting is how people again have seen the intimacy in it, the sex scenes in it,
Hmm.
as really, they've been really thrilled by that. People have been astonishingly moved by it.
Yeah.
Um, Really, really, which has been incredibly meaningful to me. I've been really surprised, and it's a funny thing because in some ways I've realised that I felt that I'd hidden it more. Turns out I really haven't hidden the emotion in it, and I'm pleased about that. But people have been terribly, terribly moved by it, and I find that very exciting. There have been other people I got out of the blue about a month ago an email from a complete stranger, just saying, "I'm only 50 pages in, but thank you for writing this."
It's
And
nice.
yeah, really amazing.
Gratifying.
Yeah, really, really gratifying. People saying, "I haven't heard this before." And for me, I don't know that I've heard it before, but I didn't think I was just writing the story that I needed to write rather than trying to be innovative in any particular way. And then I suppose, so then, and it's also listening to your beautiful reading of it, is that I go, "Oh, I see. There are things that I can see that I've done
Mm.
that I hadn't really owned up to knowing that I was doing." Um, One of the things is this journey of the young man coming, not necessarily coming out, but quite often when we read about men, whether gay or straight, in a sexual situation, they know exactly what they want and
Yeah.
how to do it, and there's a confidence, there's kind of inbuilt confidence about that, and I really what I loved about your reading of it is that it shows this uncertainty that he's got and how doubtful he is as a sexual being, because
Hmm.
you could argue all sorts of things. But I found that very exciting to hear people's reflections on. Yeah, but yeah, it's been very, very movingly received.
Wonderful. I'm pleased. I'm pleased for you. It's great.
Um, Alex, what a complete pleasure. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me today about product placement. I am not Raymond Wallace. I'm so thrilled that you've done this. And for anyone who's watching who wants to find this, Saga Egmont are the people who you go to find this audiobook, which is, as I say, so beautifully read by Alex. Alex, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sam.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.